Everybody, how are you? Okay, so this morning we're going to look at scheduling in OnCourse. Now, just before we get started, there's going to be a lot of content we're going to cover today, which may be a little bit overwhelming. So OnCourse University is going to be your best friend when you need to adjust schedules or if you need a little refresher on what we reviewed today, just because there's simply a lot of stuff that we're going to cover. If you have any questions throughout the training, please let me know, and then we can stop and make sure that we review it again so that everybody feels comfortable. A lot of what we're going to review today is going to be specific to what's going to happen after we import your rosters over from webcams for the 18-19 school year. So hopefully most of you have built your schedules in webcams. Either they're mostly complete or done at this point. So in OnCourse, hopefully you just need to do a couple of tweaks, and that's what we're going to be covering today. All right? So again, for those of you that have been in the class, sorry, I'm going to repeat myself. OnCourse is a web-based program, so you want to use Chrome or Mozilla. You do not want to use Internet Explorer with OnCourse. All right? Now, I had mentioned OnCourse University. So that's a link up in the top right-hand corner that you can click on. And when you get in there, I recommend that you type in the word class manager in your search bar up at the top here. Okay, so when I type in class manager, that's the tool that OnCourse uses to create schedules for the current school year. So when I click on my class manager, as you can see, there are a bunch of different PDFs that you can have access to read, which is going to be everything that we've reviewed today. So like I said, there's a lot of content. So OnCourse University is probably going to be one of your best friends in helping you refresh your brain on everything that we reviewed today. Okay. All right. So let's go ahead and let's just jump in. So everybody in this room should be seeing a scheduling tab. Who's not seeing it? Does everybody see the orange scheduling tab? Yes. If you don't see it, raise your hand so we can hook you up. All right. Let's get you all set up. What's your last name?
E-L-C-Y.
All right. Give me 1 second here. You don't need to have it?
Yes, he does. Yes,
Oh,
he does.
all right. Well, I don't know why you're wasting your time in here then.
Because you're in the regular OnCourse, so yeah, you have to be saved on 20.
Oh, yeah. You're Reginald?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, if you're in the sandbox, so you should have the scheduling tab once you get in there.
So you're good. Look, open a new tab right there at the top. And type www. Yes, sir. And then on your username right there, your regular email,
SB after the org for sandbox.
Yeah. And your password is going to be
SB.
Yes.
That's it?
Yep.
And your password is going to be
You're going to see security questions. Because it's your sandbox, you can just put your initials in. It's not like your live district. All right. Everybody else see scheduling? Okay. All right. So let's begin by clicking on Class Manager. All right. Now, you'll notice that when you clicked on scheduling, you may see a tab here called Master Scheduler. This is the virtual master scheduling tool that we use when we build our master schedule structure. But because you guys have already done that in webcams, you guys are going to use Class Manager until we train you guys on Master Scheduler, in which case you're going to create schedules for the 19-20 school year in Master Scheduler. But for this purpose, until probably of January 2019, You're going to use Class Manager to make any student schedule changes, students who are dropping classes, students who are transferring classes. Class Manager is where you're going to want to be. All right? All right, so I'm going to use my demo for a lot of this training just so I can show you some things without impacting your roster data. So when you click on Class Manager, you're going to default to your Sections tab. So you should see a screen that looks like this up here. Okay. Now, right below the Sections tab, you have a filter to toggle between different schools. So if you are tied to different schools, this is where you would switch your view to change schedules. If you're just tied to one school, then you can leave the school set to whatever your default school is that you work in. Okay? Now, right next to our school is a filter for the year. So it's going to default to the current school year. Again, this is your sandbox, and we've imported your roster data from the 17-18 year. So everything you're seeing in there is from the previous year. So you probably don't really ever want to change your school year unless you need to go back historically to see, you know, which teacher was teaching which section in a different year. But for building purposes and for adjusting everything, you want to make sure you're set to whatever school year it currently is. Any questions so far? Okay. So just to give you a little overview of what today's agenda is gonna look like. Okay. What we're gonna look at first is how you can make big structural changes. So if you need to add a section equals class. If you need to modify a meeting time, if you need to adjust a teacher that is teaching a section, we're gonna look at all of that stuff in the beginning. Once we feel comfortable with changing the structure of our schedule, if we need to, then we're gonna get more granular and we're gonna talk about how you can adjust individual student schedules. So that use case is gonna be more for when school starts and you have kids that come in after school or kids who need to transfer or drop classes. We're gonna then move to that portion of it, but first we're gonna look at the big picture and then we're gonna get more granular, okay? So let's talk about your sections here. So at the bottom, it's gonna show you the number of sections or classes running in your school building. So in my example here, I have 131 sections. It's gonna show me all of the classes, my section names. I can see the meeting times of the sections, the teachers that teach each section, and the number of students that are currently enrolled. Now there's a bunch of other columns that you're seeing in this view, but we're gonna jump into a little more detail with that a little bit later on. So for our first example, let's go ahead and talk about what these three little windows here are doing. So you have your department window, you have your courses window, and you have your teacher window. These act as filters. So if I were to click on my business department, it's going to show me all of my courses that are tied to my business department. I can use these filters in conjunction with each other. So I can then use my course window to say, just show me my project management classes. So now rather than looking at my entire schedule, I'm then just focusing in on a specific course. Okay. If you need to reset this back to the default view, all you'll have to do is click on the all under the department or even the course. And it's going to go ahead and reset your view to show you all of the sections that are running in your school again. The teacher window is probably going to be really useful to you guys after we import your roster data over. I could actually come in and find a teacher, click on their name, and then I can see which classes that teacher is tied to. Okay. The teacher window allows you to just look at one teacher's sections that they teach. And again, to get your default view back of all of your classes, you would then just click on the all under your teacher window. And now we're resetting our view back to the entire schedule. Okay. Anybody have questions about filtering when looking at things? Make sense? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and let's pretend we've imported your 18-19 rosters into the class manager in OnCourse, and now you need to adjust a meeting time of a class because maybe it's meeting in period 1 and you need to change it to meet to period 3. To adjust a meeting time, all you have to do is click on the meeting time. So you'll notice when I hover over it, my mouse lights up, letting me know that I can click on this. So let's use our AP German Language and Culture class. I'll click on this, and a new window will pop up. This window allows me to do 2 things. I can change the teachers that are teaching the section, and I can also adjust the meeting time. So let's look at the teacher first. So in this case, I see that I have 2 teachers that are attached to this section. It's important for you guys to know that if you do have multiple teachers attached to the same section, they will share the same grade book. They will both have the ability to edit grades, and they'll be able to see the grade book when they log into their accounts. You have an option though, whether or not you want to print the teacher's name on the report card. So let's say, for example, Matthew Bird, he's an in-class support teacher, and maybe I don't want his name to print on the report card. In that case, I'm going to uncheck that box, which is now saying only Nichelle Smith would appear on the report card when we print that out. You can also choose whether or not there's a primary teacher. So if Nichelle Smith is the primary teacher and we want her name to print on the report card, then we would leave both of these boxes checked off. If Matthew Bird, again using our in-class support example, if he's not the primary and we don't want his name to print on the report card, but he needs access to the grade book, then we're just going to leave those 2 check boxes unchecked. Okay. Now let's go a little bit further, and let's say Matthew Bird is no longer with our school or he's not teaching this class anymore. To remove a teacher, you'll see that there's an X right next to their name. When I click on that, it's going to ask me if I'm sure if I want to remove this teacher. I'll say yes. And now I've successfully unlinked Mr. Bird from my AP German class. If I need to link a new teacher, there's a button up here called Link Teacher. When I click on that, a drop-down menu appears, which is now giving me all active staff in my building. This list is not specific to teachers. It does also show you administrators and office staff members. So you'll just want to make sure that you choose the appropriate teacher for whatever section they need to teach. All right, so maybe I need to link Susan. I'll click her name, and now I've successfully added Susan as another teacher to this section. The class manager is big on auditing, so you do have a button up here called View Change Log. This just allows us to see any teachers that have been linked or unlinked if you need to go back and look at that sort of transactional history.
What kind of access does that linked teacher have? What can they do? Can they do everything that the primary teacher?
Mm-hmm.
Make assignments, change grades?
Yep. Yep.
And when you remove that teacher, does that take those grades away? Would you have to link the teacher first?
No, so the grades are tied to the section and the student. So if we were to drop a student, and I'm going to preach about this in a minute, but if you drop a kid from a class, all of their grades and attendance will disappear. Nothing gets deleted in OnCourse though. So if you accidentally drop a kid, as soon as you add them right back to that section, their grades and attendance will reappear. So it doesn't delete anything, it just sort of removes it when you unlink it. So the teacher whether if you have a teacher who's pregnant and they're leaving and then you need to link a long-term sub, if you remove a teacher, it's not going to remove any of the grades. It's going to be specific to the section and the student that has earned those grades. Make sense?
In other words, if they say, like for instance, you've got kids starting out in one class, in one section, and they swap homerooms. And in swapping homerooms, it changes the scheduling. Will they keep the grades from the original homeroom?
If you transfer them. And we're going to talk about students in a little bit, and we're going to talk about transferring and all that good stuff.
If you drop a student, like 2 months into school, you said if you drop them, all their grades are going to drop. Well, how do we get to those grades if another school calls us and says, look, your student has joined us now?
So we're going to talk about student-specific things in a little bit later. So I don't want to get too far off of this topic, but we definitely will cover all that stuff. Okay. Does anybody have any questions about linking or removing teachers in this example? Everybody feel comfortable with that? Okay. Now, you'll notice that over here, I can also change the meeting time of my section. So in this case, this class is meeting in period 6 in room 103 on A day and B day. Let's say I need to adjust this. I'm going to show you a couple ways to do this. If I click on the cell where the room is scheduled, it's going to unlink that room. I also have a delete all up here. So if you have a Monday through Friday rotation day, rather than clicking 5 times to remove a room, you can click delete all. It's going to ask us if we're sure, and it's going to go ahead and remove all meeting times from that section. So now we can come in and we can choose which room and which new period this section is meeting in. So the first thing I'll do is I have to choose which room I need to schedule this class in. So the room drop-down list up here is specific to your school building. So if you click on that right now, you should be seeing rooms that you're traditionally used to seeing at your school. Okay. So I'll use, let's say we're changing this to room 210. And now you'll notice that I have little triangles appearing. So let's talk about what the triangles are doing. This is letting us know that there's either a conflict in one of these periods with the room or the teacher. So if I click on a triangle, over here, it's going to tell me that Nichelle Smith is teaching tap dancing during period 2. It'll also tell you if there's a room conflict. So if I click on this one, we can see down here that AP American History is meeting B day in period 8 in this 210 classroom. Okay. So let's say I see 7th period is open, which means the teachers are free and the room is free. I can click on the period 7 here, and it's going to autofill my room for me across the row. But let's say you have a block scheduling scenario or the meeting times are staggered, in which case you would then just point and click on the cell and the period in which the class is meeting. So let's say this is meeting period 7 and period 8 on A day. But maybe on B day, it's meeting up here in period 6. So that's how you can stagger the meeting times of the individual section. Any questions about that process?
Okay. Let's say I have a teacher who's teaching dual enrollment, but it's also mixed with a non-dual enrollment class. Can they have 2 classes scheduled for the same teacher at the same time?
Yes, yes. As long as you hand place that, the system will let you do whatever you want. Okay. Now you also can turn off the conflicts. So you might notice that when you load your meeting times, it might take a little bit of time to show you what's going on. That's because the system is searching for conflicts with the room and the teacher. So if I uncheck that box, all my triangles disappear. Again, that's just a filter, so you can use that or you don't have to. You can leave it on if you want.
Does it matter so much in elementary as far as the meeting times?
Good question. Yes. So let's take a step over now into implementation world. In OnCourse, whatever your first period of the day is, we're gonna count that as the student's daily attendance. Now, we've been having a lot of discussions over the past few months as to what that's gonna look like with your schedule structures, because we know some schools, you know, the kids don't go to homeroom every day, or maybe they jump to a different class every day for homeroom. Your principals, or if you are principals, you should have received some calls from the SIS team yesterday or in the past asking you about your homeroom scenario. So if your kids go to a homeroom, or if their first period class, that's where their daily attendance is recorded, then we're good. We're honky-dory, we don't have an issue. If you're a block scheduling school, I think Hammond East Side may have a situation such as that. We're gonna have to sit down together and figure out how we're gonna handle taking attendance in OnCourse if you have that type of scenario. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so for elementary schools, to go back to your question, you absolutely need to have a meeting time at least for one period of the day, which is period 1, which is where their daily attendance is being taken. If the kids, don't need to look at their schedule and see that in period 6 I'm with science, if I'm with the same teacher every day, then the meeting times do not matter as much. But you do want to create a section for each class, because then the teacher has a different grade book for each class. So some of our elementary schools, they're under this thought of, well, I only put the kids in one class, and then that one class is homeroom science and math and English. That's fine, but then your teacher's gonna have one grade book for all of those subjects. So you're gonna have to still have the individual sections, but you do not necessarily need the meeting times if that's not something you're traditionally used to doing. Now, best practice in OnCourse is to put the meeting times in, so that throughout the day, you know where the kids are, and when the students log into OnCourse Connect, and when the parents log into OnCourse Connect, they can kind of see what their kid's day looks like. But again, we're not trying to reinvent the wheel here, at least for the first year. So as long as you have that homeroom schedule period, you're gonna be good. Any questions about the homeroom daily attendance scenario? Okay, so if you are in a funky situation where, kids don't have a first period, or they don't have their attendance taken in first period, come see me or the SIS team after the training, and we'll make sure we kind of brainstorm some options, okay? All right, so this area is self-saving. So I don't have to save or click anything to update it. I've technically already updated it. So I can then just click the X, and it's gonna bring me back to our original view.
If you made a mistake, you clicked on it, changed, and you need to undo it, but you do just put it back on it?
Correct. Yep. Now the window we were just looking at, we got there by clicking on this meeting time here. But watch what happens if I click on my teacher column here. It's gonna bring the same window up. So your meeting time selection and your teacher selection, they're gonna bring you both to the same spot, and you can kind of do both in one shot there. Questions so far about anything?
You could really choose either one.
Correct, you can choose either one. That was whatever you click on first, really. Does everybody feel comfortable adding a meeting time, linking teachers, and changing information in this window? Okay. All right, so now let's look at the scenario of adding students to a section. So for those of you that have been in other trainings, remember we can sort on any of these columns. So if I click on my student column, it's gonna organize my sections, and it's gonna show me all sections that have 0 students in them. And as I scroll down, I can then see the number of kids that are in each section. Now you are seeing a slash, so let's talk about what that means. So in this example, my Algebra 2 here, let me zoom in a bit. I have a 15/4. So what does that mean? It means in this section, I have 15 general education students and I have 4 special education students. So it's letting you see, you know, what your mix is looking like, because I think you can't pass a specific percentage in a general ed class, so it'll show you right outside at the section level. Additionally, if we click on this, so to adjust a student schedule, you click right under the student or the student column here, just like we did with teachers and meeting times, but now we're going to click under students. When I click on that, it's going to show me all of the kids that are enrolled in this section. Any student that is appearing in bold, these are our 4 special education kids. Okay. So let's say we need to add a student to this section, or a bunch of kids to this section. You're going to see an Add Student button. When I click on that, another window pops up, and I have the ability to search in a few different ways for my kids. So let's look at these in a different sort of example. So that's all your kids in your school. Grade level, if we click on that, I can then come in and filter to a specific grade level of students. If I hold down my control key on my keyboard, I can multi-select a bunch of students at once if I want to add them in. Once I'm done selecting the kids I want to add, all I have to do is hit the add button down here. The effective date is the day in which the students are starting that class. So it's going to default to the present date. So you don't have to change that unless, you know, a kid's not starting until a week or something from now. And we'll hit add students. So now we've successfully grabbed about 4 kids from 10th grade and we've thrown them into this Algebra 2 section. Let's go a little bit further and let's go back to add students. This time, we're going to search by homeroom. Now, remember we had talked about the sections needing to be scheduled during the first period of the day as your homeroom? We also can designate a section as a homeroom, and we're going to get into this in a bunch more detail in just a minute. But if a section is labeled as a homeroom, this box will be checked off, and again, we're going to look at this in detail. But any students who are enrolled in a homeroom that has a checkbox, I can choose a different class. Let's say add students, we'll say homeroom. And now I'm seeing a list of teacher names. So now I can grab a bunch of kids from one homeroom and I can place them in another section. So this is probably most useful at the elementary level. I can come in and say, okay, Summer's homeroom. And by hitting my shift key and selecting the first kid, if I scroll all the way down to the bottom of the list, it's going to select all of the kids in my class here, and I can hit add. Here's our effective date. And now we've taken all the kids from Summer's homeroom and we've placed them in nuclear physics. Okay. Now going one step further, if we go back to our add student button, the last filter we have is by class. So this is just going to let us see all classes in my school. And I can actually, rather than grabbing kids from a homeroom, I can say, take all of my kids from accounting 1. I can use my shift key again, remember to select the whole list. And now I've successfully moved kids from accounting 1 into nuclear physics. Questions?
If it's blank, and it says homeroom, it's still being worked on, it's going to be uploaded.
Good question. If you're hitting homeroom and you're not seeing a drop down, that means that none of the sections in your schedule have that little homeroom box checked off. Right, and we're gonna talk about that next.
When teachers open their grade books, will the students who aren't in special ed also be bold?
Yes,
Perfect.
yep, they will be both. Any questions about adding a student? Does everybody feel comfortable with that process? Okay. Now that we're in the student window, let's talk about dropping students and transferring them. So I alluded to the drop. If a kid is dropped, remember, all their grades and attendance will disappear. But if you accidentally drop them, if you add them back to the same section, everything's gonna reappear again. So you really only wanna use the drop function in the case where maybe it's like the first week of school and Wilbur is enrolled in nuclear physics and he sees what the syllabus looks like and he's like, no way, I can't take this class. I wanna, take cooking or something, right? Nuclear physics to cooking. In this case, I would select Wilbur and I would come up here and hit drop students. It's gonna ask us again for the effective date. It's gonna default to the current day and I can drop him. It's gonna ask me if I'm sure. I'll hit yes. And now Wilbur has been removed from this class.
You just drop it from a class.
Correct. Exactly. Just a class. We're not dropping him in enrollment. He's still gonna be enrolled in your school. He's just not in this class anymore. Now remember we had talked about the class manager likes to audit things? There's a tab in each section called Class Enrollment Log. When I click on this, I can then see the date that each student was added to this section or removed in Wilbur's case. So let's say I accidentally dropped Wilbur. I could either come back in and find him and add him, or under my class enrollment log, I can delete this exit line here. If I click on this, it's gonna ask me if I'm sure I wanna delete it. I say yes. And now when I open this back up, okay, never mind, don't do that. I thought he should enroll again. All right, so you're gonna have to add him back by finding him here. So Wilbur, and then you can add him back. Questions about dropping? Okay, now let's talk about a transfer. So transferring can only be done from one section of a course to another section of that same course. I can't transfer a kid from nuclear physics to cooking because they're not the same course. To transfer a kid, I select their name. I'll hit transfer students. And from here, it's gonna show me all of the sections available for nuclear physics. Now in my example here, I don't have the logic turned on that your district has, so it is gonna let me transfer him to another course. But your district, we have logic in place in your live district. It's not even gonna let you select another course. It's only gonna let you select the same type of course, just a different section. So let's say nuclear physics. I wanna send him to section 2 with Mr. Dean. I'll select that and I'll hit transfer. Now, what happens after we transfer a kid? The new teacher will receive an email letting them know that they have a new kid in their class, and they're gonna receive a PDF copy of the old teacher's gradebook and assignments that the student received. The grades are not gonna transfer from gradebook to gradebook. The new teacher is gonna be responsible for doing whatever they need to do with those grades from the previous class.
That's school to school.
Yes.
So I can transfer somebody from LaRonja over to Hammond.
No, so,
Because that's what she, I thought.
so, oh yes, the email, so if a kid is transferring from one school to another school, first his enrollment record has to be adjusted. So central office has to go in and drop him from the one school and add him to the other school. Once the new student is added to the new school, when you go in and add them here, they'll be available once their enrollment record has been added. Their grades will also transfer over into the People tab. Okay? But the new teacher will not, that I'm gonna check on, because the functionality for transferring grades across schools is gonna be new for us this year, for OnCourse at least. So I'm gonna write down a note to see if the new teacher will receive an email. Something tells me they won't, but I will get back to you guys and let you know. Either way, their grades will transfer over so that the new school will be able to see what the earned grades were from the previous school. So let me write that down. All right, any other questions about transferring, dropping, or anything in between? Yes.
If you were transferring a student from one teacher to another in your school, same grade level, transformation from teacher to student. Same teacher, go there, on your teacher, and then like teacher, and then we go to.
Are you linking, are you changing the student or the teacher?
We would be changing both. We would be, say, putting this person in this person's class.
So if you're moving the student from one section to another, if it's the same course, then you transfer. If the teachers are changing, then you just link the new teacher to whatever section that they're changing to.
So she's elementary. I got a student in the middle of the year from one teacher. This child was in one teacher's first grade classroom. That child was transferred into my first grade classroom. That's a transfer?
Yes.
Is that what you're at?
So you would have to do each subject?
Yes.
You have to do each subject?
Mm-hmm. And we're gonna talk about individual student scheduling in a couple of minutes. But yes, you do have to transfer each subject.
Because in elementary, you're saying as well, it's not, we know we have to teach all the subjects, but within Colette Talon, within this system, I have my subjects and those kids are in my subjects. So you're saying when they're moving that student from the subjects in one teacher's class, you're actually moving them to the subjects in my class.
Correct. Like in block and hours now, when you change a child to that, then that's that whole block.
Yeah, it's definitely gonna be different in OnCourse. You do have to say transfer from homeroom, but then transfer science, transfer math, whatever other subjects are taking place.
Can't throw block basket in there?
No. What I'm showing you right now is what we're gonna have to live with for this year. We can always take notes and let the development team know, but this is how it's gonna work to start. Sorry to be the bearer of all the bad news, but this is what we're gonna have to do.
I have a question. Did
Yes,
I
ma'am.
say that we need clarity if a child is from another parish and or state, that the district will send an email to the school? Is that going to the counselor? Is that going to the principal? Who's that information going to?
Whoever they traditionally notify now is who they'll just let know for this school year. So
Okay.
whoever's responsible for doing a schedule, whether it be the administrator or the counselor, they'll just follow that same communication method. Okay, questions before we jump into creating sections? Okay. All right, now I didn't point out, but you probably already saw it. Within each student window here, you can export this list to Excel. So if you ever needed to get an offline version of the kids that are in nuclear physics section 3, hit the export to Excel button, and it's gonna go ahead and download that list for us in this area here. All right. Okay, so we've talked about meeting times, teachers, and students. Now let's use the scenario and say we've imported your 18-19 roster data, but now you have to add a new class for whatever reason, okay? To add a new section, you're gonna see a button up here called New Section, and I'm actually gonna jump to your district because you guys have a little bit different properties than I do. Okay. So when I click on new section, a window pops up. And let's talk about the fields within this window. The first thing you'll do is you'll choose the course that this section is for. So perhaps I'm creating a arts class. The section name will not auto-generate. This is an internal reference for you. It's not going to print on student schedules or student report cards. So whatever naming convention you're traditionally used to using for your section numbers is what you'll just continue to use. So in this example, I'm actually going to find my arts classes. We already created one. But in this case, we have a section 031 and an 064. Perhaps at this school, this means something internally. So if you're identifying sections, maybe this is a special ed class, a 55 is a special ed, or whatever is this class, you can name the section whatever you want. In OnCourse, we recommend best practice is you just name the section whatever the next number is. So in this case, it would be 065. Again, you can name the section whatever you want. You can even use words to describe it. So a lot of our elementary folks, they'll name their sections whatever the teacher's name is, which is fine. You can do that. Just keep in mind, next year for 1920, we can copy your whole structure over, which will copy section names. So if Freeman is going to no longer be with us in 1920, then I have to go in and clean up all of those section names. So it might be useful to you, but just keep in mind it might just be a little bit more cleanup for the next school year, depending on what's happening at your building. So that's why, as best practice, we usually just say, give it a number and let it be the next sequential number in the list of sections that are already existing. Okay. All right. So our next property or field that we have is the grade scale. Okay, so we have to choose which grade scale is running on this section. We built your grade scales at a district level. So if in this case I'm at an elementary school, I am seeing an 8 to 12 grade scale and an honors grade scale. So it's just really important that you choose the appropriate grade scale based off of whatever section you're adding. So in this case, I'm going to keep it simple because we're at an elementary school. And I'll say this is grade scale 1 through 7. Yes. So that would only come up if you had kids that are in 7th grade and 6th grade in the same class. Do you have a scenario like that?
Combo class.
Okay,
That's
so
No, they have 6 and 7.
Yes, you would select a course, a class of 7th grade, and then select 1 through 7. And then you would select 8th grade course. Yes. Yeah, but it's actually asked in the course.
Any other questions on grade scales? I know, scheduling is a lot, man. It's always a lot. All right, so our next option we have is the grading period. So again, your grading periods are built at the district level. So in this example, we have 8 through 12 or K through 7. Again, you're just going to choose the appropriate grading period based off of this course. This field cannot be changed after you save the section. All of the other fields within the section can be changed after you saved it, but not this one. If you accidentally choose the wrong grading term, you're going to have to delete it and add a new one. All right, so just be really careful when you're selecting the grading term. okay? Or grading period, I'm sorry. The term is the next drop down. So if it's set to default, that means that this class is running full year. If this is a semester-based class, then you have the option to choose whether this is running semester 1 or semester 2. So if it's a full year class, you can just leave this field alone. But if it is a semester class, make sure you just select the appropriate option here. Okay. The symbol set source, everybody in this parish, you're gonna choose district always. Okay, so just write that down and remember to put it at district. The classroom setting field, this only needs to be populated if you're adding a special ed course. And the system will yell at you and tell you, hey, this is a special ed course, you forgot to fill out this field. So if it's just a general ed course, then you can leave that field blank. That make sense to everybody? Okay. The total class time, this is how long this class is. So what we've recommended in the other trainings is, because this arts course already exists, I know that this is 9308, so 9,308 minutes. So you would just use the total class time from the existing course and you would just type it in so that when your SIS team has to submit your CUR up to the state, the system knows how long each section lasted.
If you forget to add something, is it less than that?
The only one, so there are fields that are required. So course, section, grade scale, grade period, grading term, and symbol set source, it won't let you save without it. The classroom setting, again, only if you have a special ed course, then it's gonna yell at you. Total class time, I don't believe it will yell at you. At that point, that's gonna be totally that's gonna come and yell at you later on. You should put it in. You still need to put it in. And I just referenced an existing course that was already in the system, and that's why I knew how long it was. If you're adding a brand new course that never ran at your school and you don't know what the total class time is, there's a call really.
But you said we might not have to have that field in.
It will. It will. But for this purpose, to make Julie's life easier and so she doesn't, like, you know, kill me, you're going to want to just put the total class time in if you know it. Okay. Course sequence. This is a new field that we added, to be honest. We were not sure what it was on Monday. I wrote it down to ask my team when I get back into the office tomorrow. So for our training today, you can just leave that one blank and we'll make sure we communicate to you what information should be put in that field. Okay. All right, so moving along, the next checkbox we have is the homeroom. So again, you're only gonna wanna select this homeroom checkbox if this section is scheduled in period 1 and it's counting for the student's daily attendance. If this is just a regular class that's taking place another time throughout the day, then you leave this one unchecked. Display number grade and display letter grade. This is letting us choose whether or not when students and guardians log on to OnCourse Connect, which is their portal, this is saying, do we want them to see the number grade and do we want them to see the letter grade? So you would just select that according to, you know, what you want the students and guardians to see. The max students here, This is more specific to the master scheduling application I talked about in the beginning. In master scheduler, you can have a bunch of automation, which in that case, we can set a rule and say only 12 kids are allowed in this class. This is not a required field, and everybody in this room has a resource that allows you to override the max class size. So if you want to put in the max class size, you can, but again, you do not have to. Okay. Now, up in the top right-hand corner, you have identification information specific to this section. You also can leave these fields blank. Our last area within the section window are the report card and progress report settings. So, print class. This is letting us choose whether or not we want this class to print on the student's report card. So an example of something you may not want to print on the student's report card is lunch, because kids usually don't receive a grade on how well they eat their lunch. So if you don't want the class to show on the report card, you would leave that unchecked. But if they're receiving grades and they need a report card, they need it to display, then you would leave that checked here. Print number grade, print letter grade, similar to what we talked about with the portal, but now this is specific to the report card. So some schools say, you know, we only really want them to see the letter grade, we don't want them to see the number. So then you would just leave the number unchecked, and you can have a vice versa scenario. Obviously, if you leave them both unchecked, then nothing's gonna show up on the report card, right? All right, and then down here, we can choose how many decimal places we would like to print. So if we leave it at 0, the student's just gonna see a whole number. But we could come in and say, you know, go out 1 decimal so we see a 90.4. So again, I guess that's based off of your district preferences or school. Leave it to 0 for a whole number. Questions? Yes.
One question. And they play the keyboard in the semester would be what information. Is this correct on this, in this grading term? It was,
Yep, so if this was a semester class, you click there. Oh, you have to choose your grading period. Maybe click on that, hit page with grading. Okay, click on that. And then your term will filter based on the period that you choose. So that's, you have to choose the grading period. Any questions? I know there was a lot going on in here. Anybody else have any questions?
You know how you talk about the homework box?
Yep.
It's checked or not, it's not a good fitness. So if that's not checked, is the other class like the second hour type homework? I mean, attendance, yes.
They can, it's just class-based content. So it's not gonna count for the students daily, whether they're present or absent, but it'll just say whether they've been present or absent in social studies. So that's just letting us know this is the daily attendance taking period. And I'll show you guys, next thing we're gonna look at is how you can grab all your homeroom sections in mass and set them all to homeroom so you don't have to go into every single one. So we're gonna look at that in a second though. Yes?
How do you know what period is this?
No, you don't know yet. Because all we're doing right now is we're just adding it. So let's look at that next. So once we're done populating our section, then we'll hit save. It pops up, here's our 065 section, but we have not assigned a meeting time or a teacher yet. So to do that, we're gonna do what we did in the beginning, is we're gonna click on the meeting time, our window pops up, and we can choose which teacher is teaching this class. We'll give Amy another class. Which room it's being taught in, and which period of the day. So after we add the section, then we have to define the meeting time and the room and the teacher. So now if I exit out of this, we'll see that our section that we just added, rather than saying none under meeting times, it's showing us that we've scheduled a meeting time and that we've scheduled a teacher. Okay. Questions about anything? Okay. So before we get into student schedule specifics, let's talk about that homeroom section, because that's going to be something everybody here is going to have to do once we import your 18-19 roster data. So the easiest thing I can recommend is you set your filter so that all of your sections appear. Then remember, we can sort. So I'm going to click on my meeting times so that all of my first period classes are organized together. Then I can come in, and rather than clicking on every section and checking off homeroom and hitting save, I can then just use my check boxes to select a bunch of different classes at once. So in this case, maybe all of these periods or all of these classes are counting for my daily attendance. Whoop, got some 2s in there. Now there's a button up here that's lighting up. It's called Update Sections. When I click on that, a new window opens, and I can choose which field within my section I want to update. So you'll notice that every single field that we looked at when we added a section, I can batch change. So remember, we chose the grade scale. If I need to change this grade scale in math, I could use this field, max class size, all that good stuff. But for our example right now, we're going to select homeroom. So we'll say homeroom, value, true, meaning this is a homeroom. Make sense to everybody? I used first I had to check off my sections, and then there's a button up here called Update Sections. Okay, then I came in and selected homeroom, and I'll say value equals true. Now in the class manager, because we're changing a bunch of sections at once, the system wants an audit comment. I always just put my initials, so you just have to put something in there. I'll hit update. It's going to ask me if I'm sure I want to update all sections. I'll hit yes. And now I've successfully set all of those sections to homeroom. And there's a few, yeah, I'm getting there. Sorry. So I can see that it's set to homeroom. If I scroll over, see this column called homeroom? It's set to yes. All of these columns you can shift around. So if I click on my homeroom column and drag it over, I can rearrange where it's being held, so then I can easily see which classes are labeled as homeroom. And you can do this with all of your fields. So if you're really trying to figure out, how many sections or how many students are in each section, and I want that right next to my course name, I can reorganize all of my columns here based off of whatever I need to look at. Questions?
We're doing what you just did because if we're at a school that the first period is where they take attendance, because the first period has to be your daily attendance, you are setting that first period to your homeroom.
Correct. Now, that doesn't mean we can't take attendance in our other classes. We certainly can. But those are class-based attendance, which does not impact the student's daily attendance.
Which is what is on the report.
Exactly. And which is what the state wants to see.
record.
Exactly. Exactly. So that's why the homeroom checkbox is really important, and we're going to be able to do this once we import the data into your live district. Okay, and if you have questions about this, you know, you can call us and we'll be able to help you with it. So we're not gonna leave you floundering with no homework.
So this already is done for us. We don't have to go in and do it. Just July.
Yes. Yep.
Needs to go.
Are you at one of the
So, here's me, so now.
Oh, I know all about yours. So we have a tricky scenario with you guys. I think what we're gonna end up doing is adding period 0, and then we're gonna have to create a homeroom to put these kids in because, you know, 5th period taking homeroom, we could define it like that, but I think you guys have your K-8, right?
So it's
Still.
Oh, you are high school, okay. I think we're gonna end up adding period 0, but the Hammonds are on our list for something to brainstorm, so the team will make sure to let you guys know what to do, and then we'll help you out with whatever needs to happen.
oh yeah, like I said.
Until I get used to this.
Basically,
Period, not
we only have period 9, and they go through it every morning
No, you have to go.
and use that as our whole.
Yeah.
This is what we did this year. We took over number of lines, changed it to period 0,
So that whenever.
They just come back.
Okay.
You got Laranger? Get the pronunciation soon. A meat. I know, everybody in my office calls it amity. I go amity, I'm like, no, it's a meat, guys. Okay. Any other questions before we get into the really, really, really fun stuff? Colette loves what we're gonna talk about next. You need a break? Okay. Let's go for like a little bit longer and then we'll take a break. Like maybe another 20-ish minutes. Okay. All right. So let's talk about adjusting individual student schedules. So what we looked at now, that was like your structure. This is how you can grab a bunch of kids and place them in sections. But let's say it's September or October or, you know, even after the 5th day of school, you have new kids come in and you have to build a schedule for them. I'm gonna show you in my demo how we can do it from this tab, and then we're gonna jump back into sections and we're gonna talk about creating templates, which is gonna make your lives easier. But first I'm gonna demonstrate in my demo here what it could look like. So under this tab here called Student Schedule, this is where I'd go to work on an individual student. I have my drop down to my different schools again. So if you're tied to multiple, you select whatever school you need to work in. The school year, again, will default to the current school year. And then from here, I can select a kid or I can type in their name and it's gonna find that student for me. In this case, let's say we have Stephanie Esposito. And everybody just ignore me while I do this real quick. So we can start with a clean slate. Sorry, I should have done this before. Almost there. Okay, so here we have Stephanie Esposito. She's a brand new kid, and now I need to give her a schedule. I'm gonna show you a few ways you can accomplish this, so bear with us. So the first thing I can do is I can add a course request. And I know this sounds high school-y, but we have to tell the system which courses this student needs to take. So if I click on this, my course catalog pops up, and I can choose which courses Stephanie needs. So maybe she needs AP American History, and she needs an AP German class. As a side note, you can sort on these columns again. So if I click on my department window, it's going to organize all of my courses according to department. So then I can just go through and choose what she needs based off of her grade level and her specific, needs. Maybe she needs tap dancing and English 1. And let's pick a couple other here. We'll say, I'm trying to find one that I know has a section. She needs a homeroom, so that's really important. You add homeroom as a course request. And let's add one more, and maybe she needs Algebra 1. I hit the add course request. Yep. Once I'm done selecting my courses, I'm gonna hit add selected courses, and we'll see them populate over here. Now again, I'm gonna show you a couple ways you can do this, and then we're gonna jump back and I'll show you a different way. So I could click on Algebra 1, and when I do that, my class finder window is showing me all Algebra 1 classes that are running in my building. From here, I can manually choose which section I want to place her in. So maybe I'll say I want her in this Algebra 1 with Dilbert Adams. I'll click this plus button. Here's our effective date. We'll hit add. And now we've populated her into this Algebra 1 section. I can continue to do that. I can say AP American History with Brenda Freeman and add her in there. Couple other options. Let's say I just needed to find a course that was open in period 1. If I click on period 1, my class finder window is going to show me all classes that are running period 1, even if I didn't add it as a course request. So now I can come in and say, okay, I want to add her to biology CP. And now she's enrolled in biology CP with Mr. Magic. Okay. You also have an option to auto schedule your student. Now, we're going to talk about bundling in a little bit. So bundling can be used if your students move in cohorts. So keep that in your brain. We're going to talk about that in a minute. But let's say this is a high school. And, my kids don't move in cohorts. They just need a class. And here are all of her course requests. And I don't really care if she gets it first period with Mrs. Smith or fifth period with Mr. Jones. I have a button here called Auto Schedule. When I click on that, it's going to automatically populate the student's schedule based off of the course requests that I've added. The auto schedule function will not work if your period start and end times overlap. So first period runs from 9 to 9:30, and then for some reason you have second period starting at 9:25. The system's going to think that's a conflict, so it's not going to place the kid anywhere. Okay, so I don't think we have a lot of cases like that at your parish, but I just wanted to point that out, that the auto schedule will not work in that case. Questions so far? Okay. All right, so let's go ahead and talk about adding a request from a template. So you guys are going to receive a little guide from OnCourse that's going to be specific to your district and the steps that you're going to want to take if you want to go this route. So I'm going to pop out over into my sections tab and show you a course request template. Now in your district, it's not going to let you create it in the sandbox. So you're going to want to just watch up here. So a course request template allows me to come in and create course requests for an entire group of students. So let's say, for example, I'm going to create a 9th grade template. And this is saying all 9th graders need these 5 courses. Again, high school might be a little bit more tricky because they have electives, but for your elementary schools, I highly recommend you build course request templates, and every year they're gonna copy over. So you don't have to do this every year unless, of course, your course requirements change. So I'm gonna click Add Course Request Template, and I'm gonna call this 9th grade. And I'll save it. Then I'm going to add a course. And from here, I'm going to choose all courses that 9th graders generally take. So leaving electives out probably. Maybe they all need Accounting 1 and English 1. Maybe they all take choir. They all need a homeroom, if you guys have that. Maybe they need Algebra 1 and a lunch. And let's just pick one more. And we'll say Health 1. Okay, and again, you would just build this out for whatever else they needed. All science, social studies, all that good stuff. Then I'll hit Add Selected Courses. There's one more thing we have to do. We have to tell the system that this is for 9th grade, because just because I named it 9th grade doesn't mean it's gonna go to 9th graders. There's a rules tab here. So if I go to rules and add a rule, I can say attribute grade level. My operator function is just gonna be a standard equals, and then we'll say 9th grade. And I'll save it. So now, if we go back into our student schedule tab here, and I click Add Request from Template, based off of that student's grade level, the courses that I've defined for that grade level are automatically gonna pop up, and I can just select them all and hit Add Selected Courses. So rather than going in and individually choosing what the student needs, it's already going to be defined for me based off of grade level requirement. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, so that's something I recommend you do, because that's going to be useful when you have kids come into your building after the first day of school. Again, when we import your roster data, you're going to want to focus in on the structure and everybody else who's in the building. But once you feel good about that, then I'd go in and build your course request templates to make your lives and your guidance counselors or your office staff lives a little bit easier when you have new kids entering. This would function the same way like we looked at before. So I'd hit Add Selected Courses, and now I can come in and individually choose the sections that I want the student in, or I can use that auto schedule function. And it's going to go ahead and populate the student's schedule for me. Huh?
Sort of like what?
Yes, they're called, yeah. Now, we're going to talk about bundling in a second, which is going to be used, again, more for our elementary folks. But does anybody have any questions about any of this that we've looked at so far? Okay. All right, so let's talk about bundling, which I believe in webpams it's called blocking, right? Okay. So a bundle, again, is if you want your kids to all follow each other throughout the school day. The first thing you'll do is manage your bundle. Okay, so now we're back at the section level. And again, you have to just do this once, and then every year your bundles are gonna carry over, and then you can just make adjustments as needed. So you're gonna have to do a little bit of work up front, but it's gonna save you guys a lot of time in the future. So I'm gonna click Manage Bundles, and I can see my existing bundles, or I can add a new one. Okay. So in this example, I know we're at the high school, so let's just say this is 9th grade. Better example would probably be 1st grade or 2nd grade or kindergarten. I'll hit OK. And now I'm going to add my details, which are just the different types of bundles I'm creating. So you can call your detail whatever you want. You can call it Team A or Section 1 or Freeman. You can call it the teacher name. I think at elementary school, the teacher name might be a little bit helpful. So in this case, let's just call it Freeman, and we'll hit OK. Let's just add another one. Maybe we have 3 ninth grade teachers, and we'll call this Smith and Jones. Okay. Now that I've managed my bundles, I need to choose which sections should be bundled together. So for that, I'm going to pop back out into my section tab, and I'm going to go ahead and bundle my classes. Now, because we used the teacher as an example, I can use my teacher window over here to filter just to Brenda Freeman. So now I'm just looking at Brenda Freeman's 10 sections. So from here, if all the kids need to follow each other in all the sections, I can use my top checkbox selector up here, which will multi-select everything. I can come up and assign a bundle. From here are all of the bundles that I've created, and here's my 9th grade Freeman. So I'll click on this. I'll say assign bundle, and now if we grab our bundle category, oh, it's right here, sorry. I can see that all of these sections have been bundled together. Okay, everybody hanging in there so far? Okay. So now, let's say we have a new kid, and I need to add them to that bundle. The first thing you want to do is you're going to add your requests from your template. Okay, so then you're going to say all these courses this kid needs and add them. From here, you're going to hand place the student in the homeroom or one class at least in that bundle. Because if we don't tell the system which bundle the student needs to be a part of first, it's not going to know. So if I hand place my student in my bundle first and add them, then when I hit that auto schedule button, it's going to know that based off of the course requests and the section that I originally placed the kid in, when I auto schedule the student, they're going to follow each other into all of the sections that have been bundled together. Does that make sense to everybody? Yes? No? Are our brains melting yet?
When you say bundle, I was doing first grade, and so I guess I'm looking at your 9th grade example. But for first grade, if I have 4 different teachers, when you say bundle, I'm bundling their math, science, social studies, English, right? Just those courses I'm bundling. So that means under each teacher's name, they're each going to have those courses labeled English 1, Math 1, because that's first grade.
Exactly.
So then when I throw that new student in to Jones's homeroom, they're just going to Jones's homeroom with those same courses.
Exactly. You got it. So you don't have to bundle the same teacher. It can be Mrs. Smith, Mr. Jones, Mrs. Fowler teaching all different sections. As long as those different sections are bundled together and you place the kid in one of those sections, then when you auto schedule them, they'll just follow each other to the bundles that you've applied.
You see, she went and got that template she made first. Like, I'm thinking we would make templates. You would make a first grade template with homeroom and all the subjects in it. So you, instead of going pick those classes out individually, she went and got that template with all the classes already in it, signed them, and then, you know, they were already there. So you didn't have that extra step. Am I right?
You're right.
Bridget?
Yes. You're totally right.
So in my mind, I'm thinking, you know, I think elementary, I'm gonna wanna make a template for every grade level.
Yep.
That take
What school were we
homeroom
looking
and
at
all
the
the
other day?
subjects.
What school were we looking at the other
So when a
day?
new student comes in,
Champ.
I'm gonna give that new student a template. And we were just talking, we may not call it a teacher's name, because we don't want, say that
Champ
teacher's not
Cooper.
there next year, but we could give them each a code, and then
There we go.
Colette Talon is that code, 002 or 003 kind of thing.
So, yes.
Does that make sense? Brilliant. Okay, so Ms. Judy, what's your question? One, yeah, it's one person, yeah, whoever did it before. It's just, I mean, y'all need to help each other out. I mean, but I'm thinking, you know, this is only the second day, and I like to say things, if you know me, you know I ask a lot of questions, and I've been very quiet, because I didn't know what questions to ask yesterday. I was in a whole new world yesterday. But today, following my notes and listening, just like our kids, y'all, the verbiage is different. We're hearing template, bundle, and yesterday they sounded like the same thing. But today I understand that those two words, what those two words were. So I would think at each school you would create a template, especially at elementary.
Especially elementary.
I
Yes.
think that's gonna be great for if they stay the same,
Correct.
the same teacher. What's gonna be a challenge is when, say seventh grade and they have 3 different teachers, how are you gonna bundle that and know that they go to that teacher at that time?
That's a Bridget.
Yeah, so,
Good question, I can't answer that.
so it's the same concept as bundling one teacher's sections together. So if we look at, let's just use an example here. Let's say we have LeBlanc, or actually let's just go to let me go to a specific.
Like say we have one teacher that teaches.
Yep.
ELA,
Mhm.
and another teacher that teaches maybe math and science, and another teacher that teaches something else.
Yep.
All of the same grade level. So would you make a bundle for each one of those?
You would make a bundle, but you would apply that one bundle. So let's,
Do that, like
So
those
it'd be
partner
like
teachers would
Tuesday,
be in one
those
bundle?
Yes.
Then Jones, then.
Yep. So let's look at this example up here. So let's say we choose Math 3 with Wiggins, and then we have Reading 3 with Wingham, and English 3 with Robbins. So all different teachers, all different classes, but I want the kids to follow each other throughout. In this case, I would then assign the same bundle to these 3 sections, and as long as the kid is hand placed in one of the sections that are a part of that bundle, when you auto schedule, they will follow each other to the other teachers' classes. It doesn't have to be the same teacher all day. Does that make sense? Does that answer your question? Okay. Now, Amy did a great job setting up a bundle at Champ Cooper. So let's look at what this would look like. And we're gonna auto schedule a kid. You can see how it's gonna work. So I'm at Champ Cooper, and I'm gonna filter to my bundle column. So I can see, now in this case, it's the same teacher, but remember, it can be different teachers. So the bundle is called First Penny.
That one's already bundled.
It's bundled.
I'm thinking, y'all, the word bundle is my rubber band, and I've got them hooked together. Can you tell them first grade? Okay. And look, I'm not talking down to you. I need to hear this. It's over and over. Okay, so they bundle.
Yep, so these sections have been bundled.
But you're gonna need to make a bundle for each teacher.
Each scenario. each scenario.
Not just a first grade bundle.
Correct.
But first grade teachers.
Yep, or first grade section 1, first grade section 2, and then whatever 5 or 6 classes are a part of that bundle, you would apply it as such. So if we use this example and we go to our student schedule tab, we have a kid here, Brody Barbara. Now, in theory, I've already created a template for first grade, so I can then come in and choose all my templates, or I'm sorry, all my courses, and now we're seeing that this kid has all of these course requests. So let's stick with our example of placing him in one section that's part of that bundle. So I'll click on English 1. And down here, I know that this teacher, Penny and Ardoin, are part of the bundle that I've created. So I'm gonna add him into the 1. He populates. Then I'm gonna click auto schedule. When I do that, now the student is enrolled in all of the sections that we've bundled together. So the system knew to place him in the other remaining sections.
We look at it a different kind of way.
Mhm.
When a student comes into our school, we say, oh, we want it in Miss Smith, we want this child in Miss Smith's homeroom.
Mhm.
So we go to, do we go look for the teacher or see what Miss Smith teaches and find her bundle?
Yes. Yeah, so what you would do is, if you know Mrs. Smith is already a part of a bundle, then before you auto schedule the kid, bear with me. We don't have a homeroom in this example, so let's pretend English 1 is homeroom. So you'd click on the course, right? Then down in your class finder window, you would find Mrs. Smith. So let's pretend this says Mrs. Smith. Then I'd choose, yep, I want to place this kid in Mrs. Smith's homeroom. And now we've hand placed them first. Because that hand placement is already part of the bundle that we've set up over here, I can then auto schedule the kid into all of the other course requests we have here. So math, reading, social studies, spelling, auto schedule, and then they're gonna populate like that. So you just have to remember to place the kid in at least one section that's a part of the bundle before you auto schedule, so that acts as the rule. Because if you auto schedule without placing them in a section, then the system's gonna be like, oh, okay, the kid just needs all of these courses and I'm gonna place them wherever it fits in their schedule. Does that make sense? Okay.
So you need to place in that particular homeroom first, or it doesn't matter which class?
In theory, it should be a homeroom, but as long as whatever section you're placing them in is a part of that bundle. You could choose spelling, and as long as spelling is a part of Penny's bundles.
That's kind of like elementary.
Yes. Correct. So at the high school level, you probably will not use bundling.
Well, it's junior high, and they switch classes, they have different. Yeah. So it would be the same, you just have to place them in that particular home? Or do you have to do a bundle for each teacher at different times? You wouldn't have to do a bundle, and it doesn't matter, they're not all.
They already have.
Yeah, they all.
Like, it's already coming back.
But you still get placed like yes, and not just any place, right? Everybody's gonna need.
You, Miss Smith might be in 5 different rooms.
Right.
Right.
This is.
And I'm right saying that.
Our master schedule. We put a homeroom, something as a homeroom for each teacher. We have our periods. We have that all set. Is that gonna just automatically come into this? In this invoice?
Yes. So your rosters that you build in webcams, they're gonna come into OnCourse. Whatever kids are.
You will still have to bundle, or will I bundle it automatic? So they've already built it.
Now, again, you're only gonna create a bundle for your new kids. Because the schedules that you create in webcams, the kids already have their schedules. So when we import that into OnCourse, little Billy is already gonna have his schedule, so you don't need to bundle anything for him. This is gonna be specific for kids that don't have a schedule yet, or that come in after the first day of school.
Just because of our old system, our new system merging together.
Correct.
So we don't have to make the templates this year?
You should, because, well, you don't have to, but then if you have a kid come in September, if you don't create the template, then you're gonna have to manually choose which sections those kids should go in along with which courses they need.
They're gonna come in.
Exactly, absolutely, yeah, they're gonna be in and out all year, basically. So this is again for kids that don't have schedules yet for 18-19. For your kids that do have schedules in webcams, they're already gonna populate in OnCourse, so you don't have to do anything special with them.
And then you
Why would I want to create
Because when you have a new kid, you have to tell the system which courses they need. So I can't auto schedule anything until I tell them these are the courses they need. So if I create a template, then I don't have to go through my entire course catalog and say, exactly, which means all 8th graders need these general classes. So when I add a template, I can just quickly add it and move on. If not, then you're gonna have your whole course catalog and you're gonna say, this kid needs English 8 and they need Health 8. Yes. Correct.
Well, how are we already gonna have a bundle?
The bundles, once you create them in OnCourse, will roll to the 1920, the 2021 year.
Wait, once we created it, what about webpage?
No.
What about what we did?
The rosters and webcams will convert over.
But there's no bundle, no template?
No, none of that stuff is gonna populate over. But if, like for example, you know how we already imported your 18-19 roster data that you're looking at now? Kids that already have schedules, they're good. You don't have to do anything with them. That's gonna carry over, no worries. Right, the new ones, right, which is why the templates and the bundles are gonna help make things easier once that work is done. Yeah, bundling, they're tricky, and we all know scheduling is a beast anyway, so it's a lot. All right, let's take a quick break and then we'll come back and we'll look at, that's all the hard stuff, so the hard stuff is done. Yes. Yes, yeah, I mean, we might not go all the way till 11:30, we might just go to 11, but it's, you know, we're gonna look at just reporting next. So that's gonna be, that's easier, yeah.
But this wasn't bad.
It's easy, but it's just a lot. And you can do it a bunch of different ways. So that's so many ways. And they were asking me, you know, should we show them one way? And I'm like, well, we could, but some folks like to work differently than others. So if we give you options, then it's gonna make your life easier. So
you pick what works.
exactly, yeah. So sorry I showed you everything, but you now know. Knowledge is power, right? And practice.
Yes.
Yes.
She's saying, I can only make a bundle out of the 17, 18.
Yes. Now here's the problem in your sandbox. We don't have your period start and end times for the 18-19 year. So you're bundling, if you're practicing to see if you're doing it right, when you auto schedule, it's not gonna work great. Because we don't have all that in the sandbox. That's okay. But in a couple weeks, you're gonna be able to really do it in the live. Absolutely. Absolutely. You can change whatever you want. This is your sandbox. It's not going to impact anything. Deep breaths. Wait, should we?
That's chocolate. That goes up. That's chocolate. Yeah, that's fine.
No?
You never had one? I'm a chocolate cookie. You never had one. It's like okay, it's hard. I don't know all the chips. But that's all you can get. They don't make that anymore. I can't remember.
Are we ready to keep going? Okay. All right, like I said, that was all the hard stuff. I wanted to get it out of the way. Does anybody have any questions about anything that we've covered so far before we look at reports? Easy. Okay. Okay. So I'm just going to show you a few reports that you can run. And we're going to see them in the class manager, but then we're also going to see them from the reporting tab. So when you're in your class manager, under your sections tab, which is where we've been working today, you have the ability to export your sections to Excel. So this is just going to give you this view that you're looking at right now in an Excel sheet. May or may not be useful to you guys, but you do have the ability to export it out if you needed to. Okay, and you'll notice that it looks pretty much exactly like that grid we've been staring at in Class Manager, but now it's just in Excel. Okay, now the really cool report, I think it's cool, there's a department report. So if you click on that, it's going to ask you which format you want this report in. So on my x-axis, I can have either my teachers or my periods. And down here, I can choose whether or not I want to show my rotation days, which I recommend you check off. And if you want to group by department, which I also recommend you leave it like that, at least for the first example. Then you're going to hit export. And it's going to download your structure of your schedule into an Excel sheet. And it's going to break it out by department. So now I can see under my English department, here are all of my teachers up at the top. And here are all of the classes that they're teaching for every period of the day. Okay, so this is sort of like your blueprint to let you know what your structure looks like. And you can kind of see which teachers have gaps in their schedules and perhaps which teachers are overbooked. Once we import your roster data into the live district for 18-19, I recommend that you go in and you start to look at it. So you start to look at this department schedule report, you start to look at individual student schedules, just to identify if it looks okay from the transfer or the conversion that we've brought it over in, okay? So this one's really cool. If you do use this, you also don't have to group by department. So if I export that, now I'm just gonna have one tab in my Excel sheet, and I can see all of my teachers and meeting times and just sort of everything all at once. So for those of us that maybe have scheduled for a really long time, you maybe used a whiteboard back in the day to move things around, this is essentially what this is giving you. Okay. All right. You also have a room conflict report. So if I click on this, I can see which rooms have conflicts, during which period of the day and which rotation day, which rooms are being partially used. So I know that room 11, I can fit in period 6 and 7 if I need it to. And I can also see which rooms are totally unused. Okay. Our last report in the class manager that we're going to look at is the class schedule report. So if we click on this, rather than looking at teacher schedules, now we're going to look at student schedules. And this is just one student schedule you can run. We're going to pop over into the reporting tab in a second to look at how you can print student schedules. So now, in this example, we have first grade at the bottom. All of our students are up at the top, and I can see which classes each student is enrolled in. Okay, so this is a good way to identify if your kids have gaps in their schedules. Maybe you have to give them another class if they need an elective, whatever the case is. And this is just, again, one schedule report that you can run for students. Any questions about any of the little reports in Class Manager? Okay. All right, so let's pop over into our pie chart, which is your reporting tab. Your reporting tab contains all of the reports that are available to you. So everything from attendance to discipline to progress reports, it all lives under this tab here. For our specific example today, we're going to look at running a student schedule and a staff schedule. So for those of us that have been in trainings earlier, you'll recall that we have a search bar up here that allows us to type in a keyword of a report that we're looking for. So let's type in the word schedule. And our reporting list is now going to filter itself to just show us reports that pertain to schedules. Now, really important for this group. See how up at the top here, I have 9 master scheduler reports? You're not going to want to run your master scheduler report because remember, this is the big auto scheduling tool that we're not going to use yet. So if you try to run a schedule using any of these reports, you're not going to get any information because we haven't used the master scheduler yet. So for our purposes, if we scroll down a little bit, all of the schedules that are tied under the class manager category, these are the schedules that are live from your class manager. Okay, so let's look at student schedule matrix format, 5 columns. Okay, so I'll click on that. And then I'm going to go ahead and fill out my parameters according to what information I'm looking for. So I can choose my school year. So you could go back in time to see what a student's schedule looks like. I can choose the school I want to work at. I can even filter it to a specific grade level, or I can choose all, which will give me all students. Then I also have the ability to run it for all kids in my building or all 10th graders, or I can come in and individually select specific students I want to run a schedule for. Okay. Now moving down, you can also filter by terms. So let's say I just want to look at my semester 1 classes or my semester 2 classes, I can do that. Or if I leave it to all, it's going to show me all classes that a student is scheduled in. The bell schedules we didn't talk about, but this just allows us to see the start and end times of a period. You can sort by homeroom or student name. So remember, anything that's labeled as a homeroom that's checked off, it will sort like that, or we can just say student name, in which case it'll come out alphabetically by last name. Now, all of the other parameters you can choose to turn on or off. So the address window, this is if you're folding it and putting it in an envelope and mailing it home. If you're not doing that, then leave this filter set to no. You can also choose to display locker information. So if your kids have lockers, I can pull over the locker number and locker combination. I can display their counselor. I can display their local and state ID if I want. And if there's any parameter you set to yes, I recommend that you always set show open class periods to yes, because then this is going to allow us to see again if there are gaps in the student's schedule. You could enter a message if you wanted to, not required. And then we can hit view report. All right, so now we can see for this student here, all of the classes that they are currently enrolled in from the 17-18 school year. You can print, or you can download and save as a PDF if you need to. Students and guardians always have access to their schedule on OnCourse Connect. So let me just quickly show you what that looks like. So here's my demo. I'm going to go in and show you a student view of their login. So they see a schedule tab, and then they're always able to see what their schedule looks like. So earlier we talked about, is it important at the elementary level if we schedule a meeting time for social studies and science and English? No. But again, if they look at their schedule, they're only going to see whatever's been scheduled in whatever meeting time we've placed. So this just kind of looks cleaner for the students and the guardians when they're viewing. Okay. You can tag a report as your favorite. So again, for those of you that have been in trainings earlier, you've heard me say this, write down the name of the report that you like. And then when you get into your live district, tag it as your favorite. So then when you log into your reporting tab, all of the reports that you've favorited appear up at the top and you can easily find it. Okay, let's look at a schedule for a teacher. So again, remember, we're not going to use our master scheduler reports. We're going to use our class manager ones. And in this case, I'm going to choose teacher schedule matrix format. Okay. Again, we're greeted with our different parameters. So you would just fill this out according to whatever information you're looking for. So maybe I'll fill it out for this teacher. I can show my student count. So these are the number of students currently enrolled in a section. And again, here's my show open class periods. I recommend you set that to yes. Hit view report. This teacher probably doesn't have a schedule. Let me do my I'm gonna find a teacher who I know has a schedule. Whoops. So, bear with me.
Like where it says solutions?
You're in your master scheduler reports. Yes, ma'am. All right, so this is an example of in my demo, this is what a teacher schedule would look like with an A-B rotation day. Okay. Did you find the class manager reports? So I typed in schedule up there. There you go. Now, up at the top, if you scroll up a little bit. See how it says master scheduler? You want the class manager ones down here under your student information system. So try that and let me know if you have any questions. Okay, any questions about running a student schedule or a staff schedule? Everybody feels okay with that? Okay. So, thankfully, that is all the content we were going to cover today. I know that was a lot, but does anybody have any questions, or do you want to see anything again?
What about pullouts, like, when the kids go to speech, or when they go to their, 360, classes reading? How do we put that, or do we show that in the schedule? And how do we go about doing it?
You would just either have to create a section for that class and put the kid in there, or you would just put the kid in the section for the 360 or the pull out. When you run a schedule, as long as the kid is in a section, then you'll be able to see where they are. But the kid has to be in a section or it will not show up on their schedule when you run a report. Okay, so we're all gonna go and bundle our Hartzoy this weekend. All right, I'm here to answer questions.
If you have questions, ask now. After July 9th, is the only way you're gonna be able to schedule kids to get into school year. Okay, so ask questions if you have. Hi, Brad, I'm so glad I get it. See you guys later. Have a great year.
That's all the content that we were going to review today. So, you know, we're definitely, I can answer questions. We can run through more examples if you want. But I'm not going to make your brains melt anymore with anything else.
I'll go home and write my questions down, and I want to get to the next meeting.
Perfect.
We will take questions later.
And don't forget, guys, in OnCourse University, if you type in class manager,
Y'all hear this? Hello?
guys, in OnCourse University, remember we typed in class manager when we started? Everything that we went over is in here. So remember adding a section? There's a whole little article you can read about adding a section. All right, so everything that we've covered again, navigation, so this is like the real basic things that we started with. Teachers and meeting times, we spent a little bit of time on that today. So again, OnCourse University is gonna be here because there was a lot of content. Once you start using it, I think you'll find it to be easy, but it's just a bunch of stuff going on and I gave you a bunch of ways to do things. So pick the method that you like the best and good luck. Let us know if you have any questions. Should I not have said good luck?
Send that out to everybody or post it somewhere so you can rewatch the same class.
Over and over and over.
Yeah.
Okay.
Watch it over and over. The experts.
All right, so if today is not a work day for you, I have a stipend form for you. I need your name and your employee ID numbers. And it is 8:30 to 11 today. 2.5 hours.
Yep, I'll be back in July.
What about the?
Be back in July.
I'll be back too.
Yeah.
Scheduled to come back.
Okay.
So are we gonna have time in the
Look, I was gonna take it.
the time, like what time class starts in?
Yes, we're gonna have that this year.
Okay, yeah, that's fine.
Oh yes, sorry. For 18, 19, we're gonna have
Okay, so I have my fourth, fifth, and sixth hours. Times are different depending on when those kids go to lunch.
okay,
We have 3 different lunch periods.
right?
So how do we tell the computer? Do we set a time?
So we apply a start and end time to the periods. If a kid goes to lunch fourth period, then as long as that's represented on their schedule, the system doesn't care like necessarily.
Like we don't count lunch as a period.
Oh, you don't. Do you schedule a lunch? So it's
No, we've never had a choice of lunch.
So if I look at a kid at your school,
there's not gonna have lunch
You're
in
on
their
Martha
schedule.
Vineyard,
Yeah.
right? Okay, so what do they just know right now, like,
Right, because right now they all stay together. And when it was, if they go in this building, they go to first lunch. So they just know, my teacher walks in at lunch. This year, since they're all over, they're gonna really need to know on their schedule, okay, now it's time to go to lunch. And I saw that there's gonna be a lunch. Like right now, we didn't even have anything.
so we would have to add a lunch course to your district course catalog. Then we would schedule the lunch in whatever period they had
with
lunch. So let's say, for example, is it possible that the student goes to science during fourth period, but then also lunch? Is that the scenario? Like they have sort of like they start in science and they go to lunch and they go back to science?
No, it's at the end of the period before they start the next one. Like some people's fourth hour starts at 11:25, but the people who go to lunch, their fourth hour starts at 11:50. Their fourth hour is different than the other two people's fourth hour.
Okay. Is lunch going to be its own period, or is it going to be jammed in with another class? Like, are we going to represent that only lunch happens during this period for this kid?
I mean, I guess we could. It's just going to mean having to change everything.
That's if we want lunch.
8 hours. It's an 8-hour day.
I mean, if we want lunch to display in its own period, then we have to create a course and we have to schedule lunch with a meeting time with the student. You could
We
have.
can't have a time without a period.
What do you mean?
Like, could I have after fourth hour a time
Are
slot?
you just coming for the stipends now?
I don't get a
Save a
stipend.
spot for somebody else.
Like for example, there would be a break right here that didn't say 6 period, and then 6 period would start. Is that possible or not? Or there has to be a period?
We have to have a period in order to schedule a class and for try not to get too hung up on like the times that it starts. The only time that the start and end times matter are when we get into the master scheduler. Then if the periods overlap and we try to auto schedule a kid, it's not going to know what to do because it thinks it's a period. So you could hand place in 6th period there's a lunch, but without a period and a course, lunch will not show. So you could add lunch to the kid's schedule, but if there's no meeting time assigned to it, then it's not going to show on their schedule. The teacher would have a grade book, but the kid wouldn't be able to see that I'm in lunch with period. It just looks
So
like
what I need to do I guess after, I can't do it now because we don't have lunch as an option.
So,
After it rolls over, is I would have to change everything to an 8-period day.
and this is like, this scenario
Can we
isn't
look
the
at
same as this.
Can we look at a high school schedule? I wonder what they do.
Yeah.
Still going in?
See, they don't have lunch. I know because it's not our master editor.
I don't think you guys schedule lunch.
We don't. It's not in our master schedule editor.
No.
It's not a choice.
So we can easily, we can easily add it. But if we wanted to display on the schedule, and the kids need to know, then now I might be misunderstanding what you're saying, but we could have lunch meeting in the same period as geometry. A lot of schools that we work with do that.
And then they would know after geometry they go to lunch.
Right. And that's, the schools are like, you know what, they just know. But we represent it and they just know, and then they go here. So if you don't want to change your period structure, you could do that, but you're going to have to manually add your lunch sections and then place the kids in their lunch. Now you could just do it by class. Remember that class filter we had? So I could say all kids in Mrs. Smith's science should go to this lunch. And I could schedule lunch during the same meeting time as this period.
So just like I had PE and
exactly
art.
like this.
Right, okay.
And that's what it would look like if you didn't want to change your period structure. So,
and then next year maybe I could do it.
Yes. Now, should I like write a note down that we should ask the SIS team to add a lunch course to webcams, or do you want to do that in OnCourse?
No, I'm gonna do it.
We're gonna do it. Okay, so I'm gonna write myself a note to add lunch to your district course catalog.
Okay. So
that you guys can use it.
And it wouldn't matter. Or do I have to have a 4th, a 5th, and a 6th lunch? I probably do.
You only need one course, so we would just call it lunch, and then
I just don't have to put
you would. You don't have to, but it won't show up on the student's schedule. So in that case, you would have
because once it's in there, when I schedule it, I tell it.
Exactly. So in that example, you would have 3 lunch sections, and if like 5th, 6th, and 7th graders all went to lunch 4th period, and then some went to 6th period and 7th period, then you would just commingle their grade levels into one section with the same meeting time. So you don't need like 50 lunches if they're all in the same meeting time.
So in the same period, like in 3rd hour, I'm just gonna also schedule lunch. And it'll show on their schedule just
exactly. It'll just look like a conflict, but you're just telling the system it's okay because you can.
And then I'll just have to. Well, I can say everybody. Yes, I probably can. I'll probably have to pull kids because some may be going to PE and some may be going to lunch in that same class. So I really probably will have to do it individually. How did I choose to do this to myself? But I'm gonna have to go into every schedule anyway to tell it to come to that next hour. Like go back to one of mine.
Right, so that you can see the block scheduling, you mean?
So I'm gonna want to go into everyone anyway to just click in that second hour. So while I'm in there, I'll just do it. Maybe that's what it is. And then next year it'll be better because we'll know to go to 8 period.
Now, we're in the future now, but next year when we're using Master Scheduler, you have the ability to copy your structure from this year to next year. So you can copy all your sections, meeting times, and teachers. If you want to add a period 8, we're going to want to copy your structure and then add period 8. Because if we add period 8 before we copy it and we try to copy it, the system's going to go, nope, I recognize something different. I can't copy it. So again, that's going to be future. But when that time comes, we're just going to make sure we copy everything over.
We're not going to add the 8 until.
And then we add the 8. Right, if that's the way you want to do it.
Okay, and
I like the shirt.
Oh, and what about that time? Because the lunches are different, the times.
Yeah, how do we rank the demographics page? So I know you showed a report that had like the kid's picture.
Oh, that's the emergency contact listing. Report.